Hi, everyone. Welcome to the second episode of the Sheroes Project. I'm Anika Iyer, and I'm delighted to have all of you join me in hearing the stories of our incredible Sheroes, women who are showing young female engineers and computer scientists who they can aspire to be. I'd like to welcome today's Shero, Mona Sabet, General Manager of the Grace Hopper Celebration of Women in Computing, hosted by the Anita Borg Institute for Women in Technology. Mona led the strategy and implementation that took the Grace Hopper Celebration, the largest annual convention of women technologists in the world, from 8,000 to 15,000 attendees in just 2 years. No mean task. An entrepreneur, business executive, fierce diversity advocate, and seasoned attorney, Mona co-founded Biblio, an online search and sharing service, ran corporate development for Cadence Design Systems, served as vice president, general counsel, and corporate secretary at Coverity, and co-founded Leading Women in Technology, an organization that helps women in the tech sector accelerate their careers. Thank you so much for joining us today, Mona.
I'm happy to be here.
Great. I'd love to start with you telling us a little bit about your academic journey, starting with your childhood, your school, and then your undergraduate days in Canada.
Sure. Well, as a child, my family moved around quite a lot. I've lived in 4 countries across 3 continents, and by the time I was only 7 years old, I had attended 6 different schools. So all of this made me feel like a little bit of, honestly, like a social outcast. But it was a real defining experience for me because I never really felt like I fit in. I had to learn early on how to get comfortable with being different, and that's been sort of a theme over the course of my educational and my career life. So I did my undergraduate degree in engineering in Canada. I spent summers in engineering firms, and both summers I spent, or all 3 summers I spent, I was the only female engineer in the entire firm. Being a young woman working in the real world for the first time amongst a bunch of men was definitely an intimidating and uncomfortable experience. And that experience, unfortunately, is probably what made me look towards other fields after I graduated from my engineering undergraduate degree. So, I mean, I enjoyed engineering quite a bit as far as the academicness of it. It was probably just the experience that made me one of those women that drop out of technology, although technology has been a part of my life for the last 30 years since then. Let's see, what else can I tell you? I decided to move on and get a degree in law after I finished engineering, and that wasn't really planned, but it turned out to be a really great combination because I became the go-to person for tech transactions. And it was at a time when there weren't really a lot of lawyers with engineering backgrounds, not as many as there are today here, especially here in Silicon Valley.
Yeah. Next, I'd like to take you back to when you were studying engineering at the University of Toronto as one of only 6 women in a class of 180. What were some things that surprised you, excited you, challenged you? Did you ever feel intimidated being one of the only women in your class?
These are good questions. I mean, I remember vividly the very first day of school. I walked into this major sort of amphitheater place, and I looked around, and I was trying to count the number of women. I couldn't find them enough to count all of them. I think there's either 6 or 8, but there was less than 10. I'm not sure if I felt intimidated any more than anyone else did because, it's an intimidating environment, and it's just a hard degree, right? But I absolutely noticed that I was one of a very few number of women, and I think that sometimes when you go through this, you don't have the capacity. I certainly didn't have the capacity at the time to understand if and how it was affecting me. Looking back, though, I would say that I did very similar things to what I did when I was younger, and that was to try and figure out how to fit into this place where I was different, right? And I did it, different people do it by different ways. I did it by trying to be one of the guys. So, I learned to drink a lot of beer, even though I really didn't like beer at the time. And, did all those engineering type things. It wasn't until a few years after I graduated that I started realizing, being able to express really how exhausting it is to try so hard to be someone that you're not. But at the time, what was really challenging was more so than just the work of being in engineering. It was the summer internships that I had. That's because, it was work. When you're at college, you can still sort of have a lot of fun, and you're with a network of people. The work part of it was where I really felt isolated, because I was the only woman back then. I think things have changed now, and that's definitely an improvement. I think we still got a long ways to go. But putting aside, the challenges of social interaction, what I loved about engineering, honestly, was the problem solving. Compared to law, for example, the problem solving of engineering was just so much fun. I could get into this flow where I could spend like 4 hours just immersed in this complicated puzzle, and I was always a big fan of puzzles. It was hard. The first year was really hard for me, but when I got to the point where I was trying to let go of memorizing and I decided I really wanted to try and learn, that's when things got better, they got easier, solving got fun, and I do remember those days. Those were good days.
That's awesome to hear. And so moving on, in your video for Talking Cranes, you spoke about the importance of being part of a female community and to be connected with others who you share a likeness with. Why do you think this is so important? And for those of us who are in high school and college, how can we be better about building these communities and being part of these communities and networks?
Yeah, what's interesting to me is that the world is such an interesting balance of, on the one hand, pushing yourself to work in different environments with different people, because that's what helps you grow and expand and develop. But on the other hand, drawing strength from familiar environments and familiar people. So we as technical women, or girls that want to go into technology, you will learn to live and breathe in a world of different, right? Even after all these years, we are still an underrepresented group in the technology industry. And human beings can't constantly be surrounded by unfamiliar things. Like, too much unfamiliar raises our stress hormones. Too much unfamiliar and too much stress has this negative physical consequence on that. And many women actually feel that, and they don't make that connection between the challenges of being in a very challenging environment that's very different from, who you are, and the physical consequences that result. So at some point, I truly believe, when it starts feeling like you've been trying so hard to fit in, it's good for you to find a group that have similar experiences to you, because we all deserve to draw some comfort by being around familiar. So that's what I think. I think that when you're a woman, you could be a woman looking for a women's group, you could be an Asian looking for an Asian American group, you could be a vegan looking for a vegan group. That doesn't matter, right? The point is that there is value in spending time with people who have shared experiences. And I think the one thing I would caveat this with is that it's not like we're all just the same just because we're women. That's too much of a broad stroke. But there's an amazing amount of likeness about a group of women who have spent a number of years in a predominantly male environment. You'll find that we come with very similar experiences. And it's not only a great way to get support from each other, but it's also instructive to compare how others have navigated their journey and how that's similar or different from yours. So I think that as far as building these communities go, the great thing about today compared to when I was in college is that you guys have the internet. So, you asked me, well, what can we do? There's so many women's organizations today, and women in tech and computer, girls in computing, and women in computing. And I think that the best thing to do is just get involved in them, get involved in what you're doing right now with the Sheroes Project. And not just get involved by signing up and joining, because joining is good, But the real value I've gotten out of women's communities is actually engaging and participating and getting to know people, because when you actually start making the real connection with people, that's when the supportiveness and the encouragement comes in, and that's how you get the strength to navigate through when things get tough.
No, I think that's great advice, especially for those of us that are just sort of getting into these careers and these fields and who want to find that likeness and who want to be part of these communities.
Yeah, and the other thing is, I mean, it pays dividends on your career as you move forward, because you build a network. And I mean, I have to say, the very first job I ever got, I got because I threw out resumes blind to companies. Every single job I've gotten since then started with making the connection first before I got the job. And so, and that's, you know, that's the value of building these communities around you.
Yeah, yeah. So I want to move back a little. Earlier you mentioned that the excitement and the joy for you in engineering was that problem solving and the sort of technical aspect of working through puzzles. And for me personally as well, that's what draws me to computer science, and that's what I love most about it. And I think when I hear from other women in these technical roles, that aspect of their jobs tends to be underplayed, and we don't necessarily always hear that much about what work they're doing from day to day, what projects they're working on, what products they're building. So I want to ask you about your experience co-founding the video management platform Biblio. Can you tell us a little bit about this venture and how you started out with an idea and then how you built and launched a technical product?
Sure. Yeah, I could go on for hours on this, so I'll try and make it brief. So how I started, I was actually working at the time for a large software company. I'd been working in the corporate space for a long, long time. And at the time, I was actually developing a strategic growth analysis for this company, and my team identified video technology as an area for growth. And you know how coincidences happen. At about the same time, a friend introduced me to someone else who they knew quite well, who was exploring starting up a company to apply new uses of video software technology. So I just happened to have done this big research project, and I was in love with video technology at the time. The company that I was working for decided not to pursue the growth strategies we identified. And at the time in my career, I really felt like it was important for me to start getting up to date on the latest world of technology. I mean, you can sort of start doing the same thing over and over again and work with the same technology, and you're not getting current, right? So that, combined with the fact that I just love taking videos more than pictures myself, made me realize that this was sort of an interesting combination of opportunity and timing. So that's how Biblio got started. It was me sort of being open to an opportunity coming, willing to take the risk, good timing. You know, all of these things sort of play into a new startup. So what was Biblio? We were building essentially on a platform of machine learning. And so that was one of the interesting things about it, because I hadn't been in a space that was using machine learning. Machine learning is just ubiquitous now. It's practically in every technology that's getting launched these days, and I didn't want it to pass by me, right? So what we did is we used machine learning algorithms that were developed by a group at Simon Fraser University in Canada, and they specifically found patterns in video. So there's a lot of different companies that are working in that space, but the difference for us was more in the application, our ability to apply it, than just the output of the technology. What the technology actually did, I'll give you an example of a specific demo that we did, where we took a bunch of surfing videos. So, you know, people surfing, riding a wave, and we trained our system using them. And then the engine would use machine learning to self-identify patterns that were common amongst all of those surfing videos, and then it would store the pattern, and we would label it surfing. Then we would take a few GoPro videos, you know, those long, boring videos. There's 15 minutes of someone paddling out in the water or on the surfboard, and then there's a bunch of water with no discernible focal point at all. Pretty boring. But then for 2 minutes, you'd see someone actually riding the wave. And we'd take those videos and we'd feed the entire video into our system, and it would automatically identify the parts where the person was actually riding the wave. So not the parts where they were preparing to surf or drowning under the surf, but the actual wave riding part of it, and it would all be done automatically. So it's pretty cool technology. And the important part about it, the thing that, you know, it sort of sounds sexy and everything, but the important part about it wasn't so much the algorithms, which certainly were very difficult and complex, but it was, our challenges were things like, how long does it take to train, you know, the system for these things? And the neat thing about the technology we had is that you could train it a lot faster than other algorithms. So whereas some algorithms you need thousands and thousands of videos to be able to train it, we managed to be able to train on just a few hundred videos. So that was sort of, you know, a differentiating feature. So, you know, the thing about working in the tech space, it's so different from learning in the tech space, is that it's things like that that make the difference between a commercial algorithm and a non-commercial algorithm, or an algorithm that's interesting to study but may not be able to, you know, be delivered commercially. I'll say some of the other things that were instructive that I learned as we were working through this. We were using, we had a lot of people on board who had developed the algorithms themselves. They had deep expertise in algorithm developments. They had PhDs. They were definitely smarter than me. But they'd not had experience actually implementing code and executable products before. And I became aware of the need to add some learning around how to build usable code using current commercial coding languages, which doesn't seem to be necessarily a focus of computing studies, you know, depending on what you're learning. So we would have challenges, just, you know, some of your basic challenges, like we would hire a new person and they didn't know how to set up their computer infrastructure to work in the company's environment. Or they just weren't in the habit of checking in code, and so we'd get multiple forks in code creation as we were developing. Things that, when you're just running a company, these are big problems. I mean, we think that our biggest problems are trying to figure out how to get this machine to figure out surfing or skiing or something, but these were just as large for us to tackle and manage. Using libraries instead of writing code from scratch, because libraries have been tested by thousands of people and your code has not, and so it breaks and you just don't know it. So these are the things that I struggled with as a founder of a startup, and they're really quite boring, but they're really important as you're trying to build a startup.
Yeah, it's interesting to get a glimpse into the inner workings of startups and these companies as they get off the ground, because we don't often hear about how these journeys go. But so now I want to take you to the past 2 years where you worked as a general manager for the Grace Hopper celebration. And it would be great if you could just tell us a little bit about the conference, its importance, and what your own goals were for building and growing the event.
Yeah, absolutely. I love GHC, and it relates to what we talked about earlier as far as communities and the importance of having women communities around you. You know, GHC is an incredibly large community of women in fields related to computing, and within that large community, you can also attend tracks that are more specific to your specific tech community. So we have women in data science or women in human-computer interactions. So that's one aspect of why GHC is important, is that what we just finished talking about, the value of surrounding yourself with people that have similar shared experiences to you and being able to draw from that strength. But what's unique about GHC, and there's a lot of women's conferences and women in tech conferences, and what's unique about GHC is it's become a large enough force that it's drawing the attention of mainstream media. And that's what I find really fascinating about it. So a decade ago, mainstream media didn't care about women in tech at all, right? Like Lean In was published in 2013, so that's not that long ago. Once mainstream media became interested in women in tech, they started reporting about the terrible stories about women in tech, and that arguably undermined what we were trying to do, because it makes, you know, students less excited about going in tech when they read all these terrible stories in the mainstream media. So what GHC does is it shows the positive side of women in tech, and it shows it at a scale that makes it interesting to mainstream media to report upon. And that's how we're going to amplify our voices. when mainstream media starts reporting upon women in tech as being a really cool and exciting and fun opportunity, right? So this fall, for example, there's going to be, as you said, I'm guessing about 15,000 people attending GHC, 14,000 of which will probably be women. And just covering that large of a gathering of women technologists, will bring a new perspective to everyone who consumes the coverage. And I think that's the way we start shifting that stereotype at a larger scale within our industry. That's why I think GHC is really important.
Yeah, and having attended the conference the past year, I can certainly attest to the vibrance and the community and just all the little bits of inspiration that I gained. So I think it's an amazing opportunity to attend the conference for sure, and I'm excited to hopefully be there again this year. So I'd like to wrap up with just one last question before I open it up to Q&A to the other members of the Hangout. So how has your background in engineering played into your work in other fields and roles, like law, working with nonprofits, advising other companies? Do you find that you're able to utilize your technical background in other contexts as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as I sort of indicated earlier, when I moved into law, because of my tech background, I was the go-to person for tech transactions. You're a much better lawyer when you understand the technology and you're trying to do strong technical relationship building or business development or partnerships or acquisitions even. So that has certainly helped me and opened up a world of opportunities for me. In addition, I mean, at 2 points in my life, I wanted to what I call upgrade my systems. So, the world changes at such a fast pace in technology, and what I learned in engineering has changed a lot over the last couple decades. And so one situation, I took a computer information systems certificate course so that I could upgrade, and then even when I started Biblio, that was like an experience in upgrading my systems. And I couldn't have done that without a platform, a basis with a technology undergraduate degree, because people are scared of doing that when they don't have that strength, right?
Yeah.
I'm now an advisor to a number of tech companies, and I expect that what they find valuable is not just my industry experience and my business experience, but that I understand the tech challenges that they face as they're trying to build out their products. All of those things, I think, are as a result of having a strong technical background and having worked in the tech industry for many years.
Thank you, Mona, for sharing your story with us. It's been great to hear about all your different experiences and to hear all of your advice. I'd now like to open up the session to the folks participating in the interactive hangout for some Q&A. So if we can go through and hear the questions that you all have for Mona.
I think I'm going to start. Hi, my name is Sammy Siegel. I'm a rising junior at Duke, and I'm studying computer science and math. And I would love if you could talk a bit about mentorship. Specifically, did you have any important or influential role models throughout your career?
That's a great question, Sammy. I think that I had a very influential professor in college. And later on in my career, not so much early on, but I had a couple of mentors that were critical in helping me sort of see the areas that I needed to work on, while at the same time being supportive of the strengths that I delivered in my work. And that's critical because, when people just talk about the areas you have to work out and without really making you feel proud about your strengths, you sort of don't feel so good about taking that next step. All three of those mentors were men, and two of them were my bosses. So, in this world, even though I feel like I'm surrounded by more women than men because of the communities that I've built up. In this world, men still have a really, really important to play in your development, your professional development, and your career development, and it's important to be aware of that.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ashley. I'm in 10th grade at Los Gatos High School in California. And
Ashley.
I was just wondering if you could speak to some of the similarities and differences you've seen between your first computer science job and your later job as a lawyer, and then later in a business situation?
Well, they're different jobs, for starters. When I was doing computer science work, when I was doing engineering work, which was more than just computer science, I was, as I said, I was one female in a firm of men. The only other women at the firm were the assistants. We called them secretaries back then. So that has changed a lot, and I'm happy to say that, you know, as an incoming computer scientist now, you often aren't the only female unless you're in a very small firm. As a lawyer, it was a completely different kind of work. I went from having to do black and white type things. There's, you know, a problem I have to fix. There's a design I have to do, and it's either largely going to be right or it's largely going to be wrong, to an entire world of gray. And I wasn't used to gray because I'd spent so much of my life thinking technically. So it was a really hard adjustment for me, but it was actually a really good adjustment for me because we are human beings, and at the end of the day, we live in a world of gray. And so what I find is that the engineers and the computer scientists who have spent 20 years just doing that, they have a hard time working in the area of gray, but the world is gray. So that is a big difference. I think that in law, there's more women than in computer science. That's a fact. That's not a thought. But it's still not necessarily. I mean, you're nowhere near parity still. Business is, again, completely different. It requires, when you go into computer science and you stay in technology, you can sort of say, I know what I'm going to do for the next 20 years if you want to stay down the safe path. Same with law. When you go into business, you could do a number of things. You could go into marketing or finance or business development, and so you have to be really comfortable with ambiguity, and that's another skill that everybody should develop over time. But sometimes it's hard to develop when your path is laid out for you. I hope that answers your question, Ashley.
Awesome. Do we have other questions? Does the next person want to go? Mira or Arya?
Hi, I'm Mira, and I'm a rising freshman at University of Maryland, College Park, studying computer science, but originally from the Bay Area. And I was wondering what you thought about how we can apply computer science to other disciplines, specifically the arts and other non-STEM disciplines.
That's a great question, Mira. So last year at GHC, at the Grace Hopper celebration, we ended the conference with a woman who founded a company called Illuminate. And this goes very specifically as an example to answer your question. So she had a technical undergraduate degree or a technical degree, and she'd had experience in networking, and she used her business experience and her degree to create a network effect of lights that change to music. And she creates these body suits with lights, LEDs all over it, and dancers wear these body suits, and when they dance, you can see this on YouTube, when they dance, the lights change based on the tempo of the music in real time, so it's not predefined. And the result is phenomenal. I mean, we just went crazy. There was like 10,000 people going nuts watching Illuminate. And there's a beautiful example. She was a dancer in college as well as being interested in computer science. And so there's a beautiful example of how you can apply technology to art, create some amazing things that are technically really quite complicated. She has patents on them, and make, you know, the world a happier place.
Great, thank you so much.
We can have the next person go.
Hi, I'm Arya Dandabate. I'm currently a senior at Ridge High School in New Jersey, and I'll be attending NYU Tandon School of Engineering next year. I just wanted to ask you, as a leading woman in the entrepreneurial and tech industries, you may be able to attest to the fact that it's difficult for women in power to be taken seriously, as they're often seen as aggressive and power hungry. Do you think this is an issue with society's definition of power and leadership? And if so, how can the definition be changed to accommodate an equal perception of men and women, especially in the tech industry?
Oh, wow, that's such a intelligent question. I think you'll do well in life. Yes, I could go on for hours about this also. I think that our culture here, particularly our westernized culture, and this isn't my thinking, this is people smarter than me thinking this, define leadership essentially to be equated with what is traditionally a masculine set of characteristics. Even though many studies have shown that characteristics that we would identify with as being more feminine are, when you integrate those into leadership, you are a more successful leader. But it doesn't matter. We naturally, and not just men and women do this, men and women naturally identify certain masculine characteristics with being a leader. So that is true. The question is, how do we change that? And I think, this is a hard question. This is the multi-million-dollar question. You have to take it from two different angles. First of all, women working together to be able to recognize that bias in ourselves, because it does exist amongst women also, and then changing how we react to people and what we think about leadership is going to be one important step. And then the other important step is to figure out how to change the implicit biases within the world and within the work world. And there's been a lot of people trying a lot of different things to change unconscious or implicit bias in workplaces. A lot of companies that have invested a lot of money in it. Not a vast amount of what I would call scalable success yet. So you can achieve success one person at a time or a small group at a time over a period of time. But there's some interesting new startups that are trying to introduce technology as ways to create scalable changes in how people start removing bias from the three key steps in a career, being, getting a new job, the interview process, being retained in a job, so not getting a performance review that's just so patent unfairly that you just want to say, I don't want to be part of this anymore, and getting promoted. I'm happy to talk to you guys offline about what I see as being some interesting new startups in this space, but I think this is an opportunity for all of you to start looking at the technology that you can contribute to the world that actually goes towards solving this problem.
Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Ellen Yuan, and I am...
Ellen? Hello? Okay, do you want to try again? I think you got a little cut off.
All right, can you hear me now? Hello? Okay. Hi, my name is Ellen Yuan. I'm a rising senior at Duke, and I'm studying computer science and statistics. So I actually attended my first Grace Hopper conference my freshman year in Minneapolis, where there were about 5,000 attendees there, and ever since then I've gone to every single Grace Hopper conference, and I've seen the numbers grow. And that's awesome. But with the increased numbers, it also brings some challenges. So I've been wondering, in the past couple of years, how have you planned Grace Hopper to fit the needs of so many attendees?
That is definitely something that the Anita Borg Institute has thought about and is continuing to try and work on. I was, working on Grace Hopper for a very specific period of time to try and scale it to the size that it needed to scale. I certainly have some views on it. I think the Institute is continuously trying to work on making sure that there are smaller communities within the large community. I would suggest that you think about it in terms of what you can do to create smaller communities within Grace Hopper. I mean, Grace Hopper, the Grace Hopper celebration is about the community, and the community is a large part about what makes GHC run each year. I mean, the Institute itself is quite small, and then we have hundreds and hundreds of volunteers that actually make Grace Hopper what it is, and that's why it's so special. So and this will be instructive for you through your entire life. Instead of looking to the organization and saying, what are you going to do to make it more comfortable when it gets to be so large, I would encourage you to look with your friends and say, what can I do to create a smaller community within this large multi-thousand person event? Because there's excitement in being part of a large movement, but at the same time you want the comfort and the familiarity of something smaller. The beautiful thing about Grace Hopper is it is the community what it makes it. So feel free to put your own leadership hat on and come up with some ideas there.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Hannah?
Rising freshman at Georgetown, where I'll be this fall. I hope I'm coming through properly. My computer's been locked. Okay, good. We're good. So earlier I heard you mention the book Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg. I actually just read it a couple weeks ago.
And now you cut out.
In your career. Oh, I cut out.
Oh, sorry.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
We good? Yes? No?
Yeah, do you want to just repeat the question?
Yeah,
for a second.
So my question was, you mentioned the book Lean In, and I just read it.
Oh, no.
Points at which you felt the need to lean in. To go through.
So I think, Mona, what Hannah was asking was whether there were points in your career where you felt as if you had to lean in.
Good.
Yes. I think that is true for everybody. I mean, you don't grow by not trying to take on things that are outside of your comfort zone. And so if lean in means taking things outside of your comfort zone, then I think that everybody that does that who actually proceeds in their career feels like they have to do that at some point in time. I mean, one of the things that Sheryl Sandberg had said many, many, many years ago that was really important. When I heard it, I thought, yeah, absolutely. Is she said, and I've seen women do this, is she said, don't say no to a job because you're thinking about having a child. Because thinking about having a child is still a long way from having a child, right? And so many people think about what the possibility of the future is and then say, therefore, I'm not going to pursue this avenue right now. And it just limits you. So, it's a level of discomfort that you have. It might not even be a real world problem. It's just something that sometimes we create in our own mind. But whatever it is, whether it's a real world problem or something that we create in our own mind, this idea of making sure that consistently you're putting yourself in a state of discomfort so that you can learn how to grow. That's how I see lean in, and that's what I think I've had to do and what I think is important for everybody to do.
Thank you.
Women
so
or
much.
men.
So I think we have one last question from Apara before we wrap things up. Apara, if you want to go ahead.
Hi, Mona. My name is excuse me. My name is Apara, and I will be a senior at Duke. And my question is, in these male-dominated fields such as engineering, do you ever feel like women are underestimated and have to go above and beyond to prove themselves? Have you ever had a personal incident like that?
I do think that, and it goes back to what I'd said before about the qualities that we perceive as being leadership qualities tend to be expressed more masculine, so more often by men than by women, and that's a general overstatement, but not entirely untrue. And so as a result of that, it turns out that as you become more and more senior in your career, it's not necessarily the work you do that determines how far you're going to progress. Doing good work sort of just gets you to the table. And then what it is sort of how you interact, that gray that I was talking about, that gets you up to the next level. And in that process, people are judging you based on subjective things, and implicit bias does come in. And so, yes, there are these issues where, in the real world, I've seen that in order to be able to be compared against this person who might work at the same level as you, you have to work way better or influence way harder or be networked way more, whatever it is that's going to get you a little bit higher. Now, is that fair? No. Is life fair? No. There's a lot of things that are unfair. There's probably things that are unfair to men also. So I think instead of walking around saying, life's not fair, I don't want to be part of that, what's more instructive is to say, I'm going to be part of that, and then I'm going to change it. And I'm going to invest in trying to figure out systemic ways to change it as I'm part of it. But, in essence, my answer is yes.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. That was just absolutely wonderful. But unfortunately, we're out of time for today's Hangout. Thank you so much, Mona, for joining us today and sharing your thoughts. They were just really inspiring to hear, and I'm sure it was not just great advice for me, but everyone else on the Hangout as well. And to all of you that joined us viewing, thank you so much as well. I hope you all enjoyed this as much as we did. So a recording of this interview will be available shortly on our YouTube channel. So please feel free to forward it to any others you know that might be interested in hearing about Mona's experiences. And if you know of a Shero who you think we should include in a future episode, please nominate them through the website, and we will gladly feature them. And finally, mark your calendars for the next episode of the Sheroes Project, which airs on June 8th at 4:30 p.m. Pacific Time. Our third Shero is Shalini Govil-Pai, Director and Global Head of Product Solutions at YouTube. Details will be posted shortly, and I hope that you will all join us to hear from her as well. Thank you, and have a great evening.